Ric Flair chop go. Oh, Rob. Hey yo, what's up? I'm Slim Fly and you're watching another episode of Alt Fly. But for this show, we're gonna talk about the best years in hip hop. Sorry, skinny jean wearing ass niggas in the late 80s or the 2000s. This is about the 90s. This ain't your era, I don't give a fuck. Turn off now. Okay, the fourth best year for hip hop has to be 1996. You had a bunch of seminal albums that came out that year. Whereas the Fugees Discord, Tupac dropped All Eyes on Me, and Don Illuminati, The 7 Day Theory. You had Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt, Nas dropped It Is Written, Ghostface Killer, Iron Man. Can't forget OutKast with ATLians. Busta Rhymes, The Coming. I like to call them unskippables, where you can play the whole album without having to skip through tracks. You also had some lows though, and that's why it was a little bit lower than these others on the list, because there's a lot of people that had their sophomore slump that year. There's a lot of older rappers that came out in the late 80s and early 90s that put out albums that wasn't that good. You know, that was the year Tupac died, which threw a bunch out. First, actually, he got out of jail and then died. There was a couple of greatest hits albums that, you know, when you put out a greatest hits album, that means you pretty much is calling it a rap. Now, the reason why this year was so big, ATLians kind of solidified OutKast, and it kind of brought the South into a different light when it came to hip hop. Plus, you got Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt. The guy that we know now on jet skis and shit with helmets, who's taking over everything, this was when he first hit the charts and people first started hearing about him. A lot of people slept on this album. It's a very slept on album. Let's go to the panel and why they like 1996. We got Tommy Twitter Thumbs and my man Facebook Freddy.
With 1996 having two of the greatest Tupac albums of all time, and with how far he has been.
Them is good Pac albums, but you way going. Them ain't the best Pac albums. Them ain't the best Pac albums. Like when people bring up Pac best song, they don't bring up something off of All Eyes on Me first. They bring up Brenda's Got a Baby.
Keep your head up. I get around.
I get around. Don't get me wrong, those are dope albums, but that ain't the best Pac out there. I like the Ghostface album. The Ghostface album to me, it was killing the game because when it came out, his beats didn't sound like nobody else.
Show me a little bit about OutKast and that ATL and the impact that album had.
That's when the South officially took over.
Yeah.
That's when the East Coast West Coast beef became irrelevant.
I don't know. You can say that the East Coast West Coast beef became irrelevant because it finally reached its cap. No, it reached its cap at the end when Biggie died.
Biggie died next year. That was the album that Andre 3000 kind of came into his own. If you look into the first and the Southern Player listed, you know,
he was still trying to be kind of a gangster
he was
back
still,
then.
Not even trying to be a gangster, but he was still kind of finding his voice. You know, him and Big Boy Styles were a little bit similar. His cadence was different, but they rhymed kind of similar about the same stuff. By this next album, though, Andre's style had became Andre 3000.
They developed that persona about the pimp and the poet, I think, is when that really became apparent.
All right. Now, another big album was Fugees Discord.
The Score got the most bangingest Fugees tracks out there, period. From any Fugees member, from any album, nothing else they put out can mess with The Score.
That album stands out to me as being one of the most important albums of the decade, let alone just 96. I think when you talk about complete albums, they used all three of their talents in unique ways in order to fill different positions on the album. Wyclef really kind of came into his own as being like a producer at that point. And you get that Lauryn Hill really kind of found her voice as the singing rapper, you know? And I think that Pras,
he had cool cornrows. And for those reasons, that's why we have 1996 coming up as the fourth best year in hip hop. Okay, so the third best year in hip hop is 1994. Now, this was a great year for classic albums. All these albums pretty much pulled out 5 mics and considered classics. We talking about Biggie's first album here. We talking about Illmatic on here. We talking about OutKast. And then Redman dropped that There's a Dark Side. The first half of that year kind of started off real slow. And then like April, May hit, and the album just started banging, 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 banging. The album that pretty much sums up my whole 1994, Bone Thugs and Harmony creeping on the come up. When Thuggish Records dropped in that year, that shit was everywhere. So I left Cali, was headed to the airport, heard the song on the way to the airport. When I touched down in Phoenix, the first song I heard in the cab, Thuggish Ruggish, and that just changed the game. Next thing I know, that shit was all over the box, you know, MTV, BET, it was everywhere. But 94 was a great year. Now the reason it's not higher on the list is because as high as the highs was, it also had some really low lows. Insane Clown Posse came out that year. So first off, let's talk about Illmatic. When Illmatic hit, everybody said it was just changing the game. Tell me something about Illmatic.
Wasn't nobody flowing like that at that time. It wasn't just telling the story, it was the whole delivery. It was syllable for syllable. It was...
Is the deadpan, like the deadpan flow that you didn't really get from so many people. Like a lot of people were a lot more animated with the shit. Nas's shit was just like flat throughout the whole thing. And it really kind of made you concentrate on the lyrics.
Pay attention to the lyrics.
And,
yeah.
and the production on that album is the 90s. I think like when you think of the beats on that album, New York State of Mind, Illmatic.
Life's a bitch and then you die.
Life's a bitch
That's why we
and you
get
die.
high, cause you never know when you're gonna go.
Those albums kind of divine that kick snare thing that the 90s is kind of known for, right?
AZ was on Life's a Bitch. And,
That's true.
And that's the song, that flow that AZ came out with on that is what changed the game. That visualizing the realism of life and actuality when they was hitting every syllable on every beat.
Big thing about that album was Nas kind of went out and told a great story through that whole thing. And like a lot of people would talk about what's going on in the streets and things like that and how NWA gave it to you in a way that you felt like you was right there. His flow even seemed like he was just reading a book to you at times. And it felt like listening to his album, you felt like you was on the 22nd floor in the Queensbridge projects and just looking out at all of this shit happening.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because the documentary rap really developed itself in this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, really, the next one that I would talk about that was really like a documentary style would be Ready to Die.
And I understand what you're saying, but it was still storytelling rappers out there. Shit, even Brenda Had a Baby that came up before there, and that's probably hands down one of the best storytellings out there. And since you brought up Ready to Die, let's go ahead and talk about Biggie's Ready to Die. Because this album alone put him into a place where he's still considered top 5 dead or alive off of only one regular album and a double disc.
First off, let's start with the title, right? Mm-hmm. The title lets you know right off rip that you're going to get somebody who's going to give it to you as raw as they know how, right? Diddy's production has never been better.
Because Diddy didn't really produce a lot of that. He just put his name on it.
As far as anything that Bad Boy's been associated with, I think that is one of the best produced albums that they've ever put out.
Okay, so what I gotta say about 1994 holds a special place in my heart. It's because it's the year that the most beautifulest thing in this world came out. And for me personally, that is my favorite album, that's my favorite song, that's the song that inspired me to be a rapper. That's what made me want to bust flows and shit because my whole style, the whole way I do things is the most beautifulest. So I felt like that song was talking to me on a whole other level that other people don't even get.
So for these reasons, and these classics being released in this year, 1994 comes in as the 3rd best year in hip hop. Shout out to my man Dupree. Woo! 2nd best year in hip hop was 1993. Now the highs wasn't as high, there wasn't a bunch of classics that dropped like in 94. However, the whole year just was filled with great albums. You had Onyx with Bacdafucup. You had Wutang, Enter the 36 Chambers. Look, man, I didn't even know what to think about that album. All I knew is it was dope, and there was some niggas out there that thought they was ninjas. You had Souls of Mischief with 93 to Infinity. Niggas was getting their girls taken over this album. Tribe Called Quest dropped Midnight Marauders. You had Black Moon with Enter the Stage. You had Doggy Style by Snoop. Shit, they had Run DMC shake their head ball and drop down with the Kings. It's likely if you had just a band of albums from 1993, anything you reached and pulled out, you was gonna be happy with. Maybe the highs wasn't as high as some of the other years, but the lows was more like the middle of most other years. Man, let's go to the panel and see how they feel about 1993.
I think 1993 is a year where a lot of people were surprised by what came out. I don't think there was the cast so much of the East Coast versus West Coast beef. There wasn't like this need to be gangster and everything. They hadn't squashed conscious rap at that point like they did later on. What I really want to talk about is Coming Out Hard, where Coming Out Hard had some of the most incredible beats and rhymes for a group that I feel like, you know, people never would have seen coming. The way that 9mm Boys comes in and it's got that sample that's a really gangster swing type sample, but then it bleeds immediately into like the reggae dance track. It's typifying of the entire year, where it's like there's a lot going on, but it kind of blends well together.
Let's talk about Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style.
Doggy Style was amazing because when it came out, like up until that point, boom bap was what hip hop was all about. Mm-hmm. When Doggy Style came out, even though it may not have been the first gangster album, it definitely put G-Funk on the map and made gangster rap a household, well-known name.
Yeah, I don't think people expected Snoop to be bigger than Dre after The Chronic. It was the first album I can remember no skips. You listened to every single song on the album and you had a different affinity for every single song on the album. All the way to the very last one, I can remember like just being so hyped when you get to the end of the album. Why? Because it starts off with pump, 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 pump.
And like we've heard jokes on gangster albums before, but it was something about Snoop's portrayal of gangsterness. It made it seem fun. This is the happy side of gangsterness. And I don't know if, you know, it was just part of that year and it was so much fun going on in Cali. Cause like we talked about, Souls of Mischief, Alcoholics, even King T. You know, you had a lot more than just like, these dudes scare the shit out of you. Don't go down this block. Yeah. Where these albums kind of took you to like, oh, I'd love to be there.
In 93, Hieroglyphics was putting it down because that's the year Del the Funky Homo Sapien came out with No Need for Alarm. And that is one of my favorite albums back to back too, with Whack MCs and No Need for Alarm. It's a bunch of bangers on there. And they was also showing, that was the same crew that 93 Till Infinity was out of. They was all showing that, yeah, we gangsters, but we can rap too, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. And then I think one of the things that kind of gets overlooked about 93 is I think Queen Latifah had probably her two best hits ever.
Yeah, her album, she had an album, Black Rain, out that year, and she was killing it.
UNITY is finally the sisters getting their chance to respond to a lot of the gangsterism that's happening around them. But then Just Another Day is her actually getting a chance to sort of participate in it from an outsider's perspective. Because 93 was just like the beginning of all of that real hardcore shit, you know? I think that to have somebody who is from that conscious era adapting to that really kind of gave credence to the way that things would really blow up in the future.
And see, that's what I mean by this being such a good year. We didn't even talk about Tupac's Strictly for My NIGGAs. We didn't even talk about Master Ace Slaughterhouse or LL's 14 Shots to the Dome.
Or Sex Packets.
Sex Packets, Digital Underground. It was so many hits and great albums that came out that year that this year was very hard to overlook. Month after month after month, you was gonna find something great to pick out at any time. And for that reason, 1993 comes as the second best year in hip hop. Okay, I know y'all waiting to hear the best year in hip hop. And the panel picked for the best year, 1995. From 93 to 95, so much had changed. A little bit of that consciousness that kind of died a little bit with it. And it was just a lot more hardcore stuff. The albums was just hit after hit after hit after hit after hit after hit. 12 months of bangers. You didn't have any lows. Mobb Deep dropped the Infamous. You're talking about two teenage boys who's taking shots at Tupac, who was the king of the mountain at this point. Raekwon dropped that Only Built for Cuban Links. You remember the Purple Tape. What made this such a hot album was when you listen to Wutang, and even you listen to that first Method Man album, it had a Wu-Tang sound. Well, with this album, RZA took you through a whole different sound. It's more of a gangster flick. You know, if those albums was Warriors, this album was Scarface. Even for an album like Soul Food that was so melodic, they still had a really hardcore and street edge about it. Who's that peeking in my window? Nobody now. So even though it was conscious, it was very hardcore in your face with the consciousness. Gangster took over everything. And if you don't believe that, you can just look at the #1 song of that year. Coolio's Gangsta Paradise. Been spending most our life. Blow the smoke on me, Rob. Cypress Hill would Throw Your Sets in the Air. That blew up all over radio. It had turned to where gangster was the coolest thing to be. You know, and not the gangster of the late 80s who was scary. It was the gangster inclusive. It was like, come on, be a gangster. You can do it too. Let's talk to our panel about some of the other great and good albums that came out in 95.
One of the most influential albums of 1995 to me was J.O. Felony, Sherm Stick. It was kind of like when I grew up and kind of learned what was really going on in the world. When we gonna smoke a dip, all of it, not a little bit. I finally learned about what was really going on in the world and why some of these gangsters act so crazy. Because they was wet like a motherfucking orca whale.
We didn't even bring up Me Against the World by Tupac. Albums like that.
To me personally, that's some of Pac's best work. Me Against the World.
That one track might be one of Pac's best songs ever.
That whole album from front to back.
Old Dirty Bastard, Return to the 36 Chambers.
If anybody who know me, remember me from high school, y'all know that Old Dirty Bastard was my idol. I came to school shimmy shimmy y'all every fucking day.
Tell me a little bit about the Raekwon album, Omar, and go into it.
Well, back then, it was before CDs, so we had the purple tape. I actually had a tape that you had to flip over halfway through. But the purple tape was like one of the only cassettes that you could just put in on side A in the beginning and press play and let it go till it stopped, and then flip it over and press play and let it go to the end. Like, it was no
skips.
No skips.
Rob, talk to me a little bit about Goody Mob Soul Food.
Well, Goody Mob Soul Food, actually, I think built off of what OutKast had done with Southern Playalistic, Cadillac Funky Music. They built this persona of Atlanta even further. When you left the end of Southern Playalistic, you kind of had this idea that it wasn't as country as you thought, right? When you get the Soul Food album, they say, no. This is country.
It's country.
But we know what's up, right? Like CeeLo, everybody knows CeeLo as this like lovable, huggable rapper. But back then, like, he's like, man, I might stand a little bit more than 5 feet tall, but we can still brawl, you know?
I ain't
Scared at all. He shined on that album, and you knew he was gonna go into something bigger by himself at that point.
Yeah.
The title track, I think, has become sort of representative of everything that is Southern hip hop today. Everybody loves that song, but they love it because it makes them feel like they know a little bit of what it's like to be down in Atlanta.
Other album that came out, Jizz's Liquid Swords, Fat Joe's Jealous One Envy, the Dog Pound, Dog Food, the Mind of Mystical.
Can we talk about
AZ
curb
Dog
serving?
Dive.
Can we talk
Curb
about
Server,
curb
go
serving?
ahead, talk about it.
The thing that was so amazing about Curb Serving as an album is you had West Up to begin with, right? Which I feel like is the rally call for this whole beginning of like the real West Side. You know, when people would start chucking up the dub all the time at a fucking concert. The one is like probably one of my ultimate summertime tracks, right? I feel like the flow on that is so smooth, and the beat on that is perennial. Like that beat will last forever. I mean, you could drop something on that fucking instrumental today and people would think it was just produced like this week, right? Mm-hmm. But then my ultimate favorite on the album, which is like a surprise to everybody, is the twist, right? Yeah. And the reason why that is, man, is because it's another one of those story raps. But it's about a lick that nobody would think to pull, right? But you got fucking Coolio on there, who everybody is thinking at this point is the fucking commercial rapper. Everybody's like, oh yeah, Coolio, I can invest in Coolio. And then all of a sudden Coolio's in there fucking like robbing old people and shit in a casino bus.
First of the month, tell me a little bit about that. Bone Thugs, East 99.
I think First of the Month is one of those tracks that brought white people more into the world of what it is to be poor. A lot of middle-class white people started singing about their welfare check after that shit came out.
I got a whole different view on Bone. I mean, they flow did it too, but it was really their production. Bone production was kind of the beginning of the end for boom bap and hip hop, and it was like the start of trap beats. It was where...
Not that album though. That album was definitely about like piano melodies and fucking.
But isn't that what trap beats is? Piano melodies with that slow
and I'll give you this. They kind of evolved the gangster whistle.
They had the trap beats with the West Coast flavor because they had the gangster whistle on it.
The other thing is that Crossroads became such a staple in funerals at the time, which, you know, is this really sad thing to think about as defining our era. But because gangsterism, and we all are talking about it as such a commodity that they use to sell shit, right? But the side effect of that shit was motherfuckers really dying, you know?
I miss my Uncle Jojo.
I miss my Uncle Jojo too.
1995 was a banging year, top to bottom. And if you don't agree, you know what? Cool, put it in the comments. So now you got our list of the best years in hip hop. It's crazy how they went straight down the line, right? 93, 94, 95, 96, just in a little different order. Don't forget to like, share, go ahead and subscribe, hit the little ding ding button right there so you catch all the shows. Go ahead and leave comments. If you feel there's better years that we missed, put them in the comments. Let's talk back and forth. Tell us why these years were so great.
And we'll tell you why you're wrong.
I'm Sid Fly. You're watching Alt Fly. Hope you enjoyed your flight.
And I'm Contact. I'm the one that's gonna get you hot.
Hope you enjoyed your flight. And don't forget to give your headphones back to the stewardess.